But when you're cutting off all interaction between people and you are shutting down local businesses and transferring that wealth to this tiny group, how much did Amazon gain from the lockdowns of all those companies, those major global companies? They made a killing out of killing.
This is part one of my conversation with Vera Sherav, and this weekend she's teaming up with Christine Anderson in Hamilton, Ontario, Saturday, June 17th, where they're premiering her docuseries, Never Again is Now Global. You can check out the tickets at trinityproductions.ca, but let's get into the interview. So much has gone on over the past 3 years all around the world, and some people have compared elements to what has happened in the past, in some cases to the Holocaust. Today, I am joined with a very, very special guest who is actually a survivor of the Holocaust, and she has in the process of releasing a documentary series doing just that, comparing the Holocaust to what we saw over the past 3 years during the pandemic. Without further ado, it is my honor and privilege to introduce to you Vera Sherav. And I know you've shared your story many, many times, but maybe bring us up to speed and relate your story to your recent bout of activism, of speaking up about what's happened over the past 3 years.
At this point in my life, it's really very shocking to bear witness again, this time as an adult. I was a little girl. I was a child survivor. I was 3.5 when we were deported from Romania to a concentration camp in Ukraine. My father died there before I was 5, and he died of an infectious disease which was rampant in all the camps and ghettos because there was no hygiene, no facilities, nothing. And starvation, we were really just left to starve. This was not one of those regimented, military kind of camps. This was you just left to starve. And people did die of starvation. But the thing that I remember particularly most was this fear that hung over it all the time. It was like this dark cloud of fear. The fear was that you'd be put on a list and then shipped off to a death camp or for slave labor. And so I learned at a very early age that there is evil in the world, that some people are evil and some people are good. And it doesn't matter what the label is, what nationality, religion, all that. And I very much throughout my life have confirmed that to be true. Every group, it doesn't matter what the under what umbrella the group is, and every professional group as well. There are devils and there are angels. And these people choose. People choose whether they do good or whether they do evil. They're not born bad as babies.
Right.
And what I then, realized also is that Nazism is not just German. It's a state of mind. And we've got Nazis, the heirs to the Nazis, who are continuing and have continued, and that's what brought us to where we are. Gain of function, what the hell does that mean? It's a fancy phrase, but what does it actually mean? It's bioweapon experiments, which are illegal under international and national law. So you give it a fancy name, an obscuring name, that's the purpose of that. But that's what this is. And the Nazis were first to kind of do experiments in the camps using some of these, the bubonic plague and smallpox and all kinds of poisons and stuff, which they tested on people. Well, they didn't consider those as people. The people that they used as guinea pigs, they didn't consider them as people. But that kind of research has been going on ever since. Part of it is that the United States smuggled more than 1,600 top Nazi scientists, doctors, and engineers into the United States under something called Project Paperclip. And this was against the orders of the president. A cabal had begun right during the Nazi period in the United States, where they weren't listening to the legitimate government. It's interesting. Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because we hear about how certain Nazi scientists were hunted down after World War II, and it's like, well, isn't it interesting that a bunch got recruited by the U.S. intelligence agencies to do work for them, for the U.S. regime? So
most did not. The Nuremberg trials, they only skimmed a tiny number.
Right.
But the main real culprits, including the American corporate elite, the Swiss, of course, German, but these were multinationals already by then, and a good deal were really American. That was American industry provided the weaponry, and IBM provided the wherewithal to identify and then deport and take away their assets, because they knew exactly what they took a census. It was right at the beginning. They right away began census taking, first in Germany and Austria, and then in the other occupied countries. So they identified every Jew in Europe.
IBM.
They identified, on punch cards. That was the precursor to the computers.
Computers, right.
But so while it was clunky, compared to now, but it was very efficient enough to annihilate 6 million Jews and in a very short time, really, because it didn't happen throughout. And the film is really the lead up, and that's what we're talking about now. There are no gas chambers, and I doubt that there will be. They won't need them now. Now technology is so much more advanced. They can click from remote. People don't even know who the enemy is because it's unseen, right?
Well, and while we're on dark subject matter, here in Canada, there's a program called Medical Assistance in Dying, where people are actually volunteering to get lethally injected, and it's kind of approved by the government. But I want to hear about your experience when lockdowns happened, when you heard about this thing called COVID-19. I'm curious, when was the first time, Vera, that you were like, something's off here. This reminds me of the past in a bad way. What was the kind of first sign for you that something fishy was going on?
Well, I live in the center of New York City, and New York was a ground zero.
Yes. And
here we were told about all the overrun of the hospitals, and people are dying, and I was getting phone calls from Israel, from family. Oh my God, Central Park is all these tents at a hospital. I said, what? And there were few people who went with their cell phones and took videos of inside hospitals, and they were empty.
Right.
And I said, that's a lie then. We're being told a lie. Something else is going on. That was
the first part.
Right. There were 3 hospitals were in fact overrun and all that, but that's because they sent everybody to those 3. And the others were left empty. They didn't use it. The Javits Center was transformed into a hospital, and a battleship was came here. None of that was used, and certainly not Central Park, that's for show. I mean, this was all fear-mongering, and fear-mongering is what I connected, because that's the main weapon, really, that the Nazis used to keep people paralyzed with fear. Fear was very, very effective. They had, this has been studied for a very long time. Fear. And there are, psychologists and psychiatrists in particular were, the main medical movers in Nazi Germany. And mind control, being able to control other people, is something that they studied very assiduously. And Then they studied how to control people and how to weaponize, that fear. This
Yeah.
very, this was not just a, slip shot. It was very, very contrived. The CIA built on that for the mind control experiments, and that was straight Nazi playbook.
Yeah. And probably
LSD and all those things. Yeah.
and probably some of the same scientists as well.
Well, that's it. Those 1,600, you see, not only did they continue their scientific work as they had under the Nazis, but they trained a generation of American scientists and doctors to do things the Nazi way. That's how you were able to get the CIA mind control, where they used all kinds of psychedelic drugs and normal human contact, right? Isolation is always a very, very powerful weapon. Think about it. Prisoners, what are they most afraid of? Being put in solitary confinement,
Right.
isolation. And what was used, the first thing with the so-called COVID pandemic, really was planned.
Stay home, stay safe. Yeah.
And particularly also the elderly, they got rid of them.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it was bad up here. It was very clear that it affected older demographic, and the elderly in Canada were treated terribly. And in terms of the death toll, it was by far and away the elderly population.
Canada, unfortunately, does have, in fact, they've had the highest number.
Is that right?
Yes, 70%.
Wow.
And this was not the caused by the virus. This was caused by everything else that they did.
So
and withholding, medicines.
Yeah, no, that's that.
To this day, nobody is explaining. How do you explain that doctors in Canada, in the United States, in Europe, Australia, Israel, all were forbidden to use life-saving medicines that had been used for decades, whose track record for safety is an open book?
It's proven. Yeah. And since when in a history of the medical field, when someone has an illness, don't do anything. Just go home.
Yeah.
Don't treat it. Just go home, and that's it. Hopefully, it doesn't get worse. It's crazy, but I'm sure we could go over all of the COVID insanity. But I wanted to focus on yourself, because you're in New York. You see that there's lies starting to pop up, and your spidey senses start to tingle. And now you are somewhat of a public figure. You're speaking out. I think you recently met Robert F. Kennedy Jr., which is very cool.
Well, I met him before, but yeah, we're friends. That's true.
Yeah.
It's just this time he came to dinner. Yeah.
And so, Vera, were you a big public figure before all of this? And when did you start speaking out in regards to lockdowns and everything that was going on? Was there another like tipping point that said, I have to speak out about this?
I mean, in my own mind, there was a tipping point when I realized that I'm bearing witness again. Only this time, I'm not a little girl. This time, I'm an adult, and I have a responsibility. Because silence was what made the Holocaust happen. Without the silence, which meant approval, silence really does mean something. It doesn't mean that you're dumb. You're not oblivious. You're kind of pretending, like willful ignorance. You're silent, you as if you don't see and you don't understand what's going on. And that's what people tried to say. Many Germans said, oh, we didn't know. That's nonsense.
Right.
You can't not know when suddenly all Jewish stores are, vandalized and given to others, and when all your Jewish neighbors are gone, that sort of, you can't really.
Right.
But that was for a long time, the saying they didn't know.
Sorry to cut you off, but I have some vaccinated friends, and I talk about, being an unvaccinated person, I couldn't go. It was really bad in Canada. You couldn't go into a store, and they respond with, well, that's what we thought at the time, and that was just the way it was. That we were just kind of working on our best information. And I tell them, like, that's not even true, though. Like, we knew very well that it wasn't that big of a deal, and that these injections weren't that safe. But it's crazy how people still kind of deny their participation.
Yes, denial is very much the defense mechanism. But no, it doesn't wash, because the question really is, at what point how much are you willing to do to, in a sense, to propel the lie? Because by punishing, by, discriminating and going along with government edicts that essentially are totally destroying everything that is about human rights, about democratic rights of people to make their own decisions. Just because if you think that you're terrified of this virus, well, you can lock yourself up, but lock others up. They're not sick. They're not infected, right? That's the point. It was very well known how one deals with a real pandemic. You isolate the sick. You keep them from infecting others, and you treat them. You treat them back to health. And that happened, that's normal. But when you're cutting off all interaction between people, and you are shutting down local businesses and transferring that wealth to this tiny group, right? How much did Amazon gain from the lockdowns of all the...
Gosh.
Those companies, those major global companies, they made a killing out of killing. How do you teach children, don't go near grandma or you may kill her? I mean, that's cruel.
Yes, it's evil.
That's malicious.
Yeah.
That's not, that's not an innocent thing. Oh, we didn't know. If you didn't know, then why did you follow?
Vera Sherav is teaming up with Christine Anderson this weekend in Hamilton, Ontario, June 17th on Saturday. You can get tickets to watch the premiere of Never Again Is Now Global, this docuseries by Vera Sherav. You can watch part 2 of the interview, but if you want tickets to this very cool event, go to trinityproductions.ca. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you soon.